You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is a gentleman who's had quite a successful business career. He's had some key theories and themes that he has been an advocate for, and I'm going to let him describe those. His name is Yuri Elkaim. Yuri, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Doug.
As is a tradition here on this show, give us a little bit of your backstory, Yuri. Tell us about your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was from a very young age unemployable. I realized I was a rule breaker, so I had that entrepreneurial kind of bug very early on, but I actually didn't think about business for a long time. My whole goal growing up was to play professional soccer. So when I was in my teenage years, that's all I did was play soccer, trained, and I was eventually able to play pro in my early 20s, but in that process, I lost all my hair at the age of about 17 years old to an autoimmune condition. And that it kind of put a fork in the road of my journey on this planet in a good way. I was fit, but I wasn't healthy. And that was a big wake-up call for me to recognize what's going on here. Let me kind of dive into this. And so that kind of sent me on this journey parallel to playing soccer, which was learning more about health. And I went to study kinesiology and health sciences and then holistic nutrition. And I started to really enjoy what I was learning. And I realized man, I didn't know anything. I thought I was a pro athlete and I had no clue about any of this stuff. So I started when I was in university, actually working as a personal trainer as well. And I really enjoyed that. And then when I retired from playing soccer in my mid-20s, I actually started getting back into more of the personal training and nutrition work with one-on-one clients. Did that for another 7 years, got burnt out. And around 2005, I was like, well, I want to help more people. I have no leverage doing one-on-one, so maybe I can do something else. And this is kind of when the internet's becoming a bigger thing. And I got a little bit of guidance from a mentor I was working with. He said, why don't you start a website? I was like, cool, I've got no idea what that is or how to set it up, but let's give it a shot. And that's kind of how this whole online journey started. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no guidance. So I struggled for a number of years, but I had this big vision of wanting to help 1 billion people improve their health. I had been through my own issues. I had family members go through theirs. I really enjoyed helping people, but I didn't know how to build a business. And so I had to learn the hard way of trial and error, unfortunately. And then I finally got some mentorship and sped things along a little bit faster. And that business, the first business online, was to the average consumer, right? Helping them lose weight, have more energy. We had a variety of workout programs, nutrition programs, stuff like that, and built that up to a very significant level. And, it helped 500,000 customers. So became a number of New York Times bestseller. I was on all the big shows like Dr. Oz. And then I decided to sell the business after 13 years because I started getting a lot of other health professionals asking me for business advice. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a gap in the marketplace here. So I figured if I could help other healers heal more people, then that'll get me personally closer to my goal of helping 1 billion people. And they obviously want to serve more people. So that's where Healthpreneur, the current company that I've been running for the past 8 years, kind of came out of. And by that point, I just kind of figured stuff out, right? I would hate to be in a position to even think about giving people advice from something I'd not done before. So I felt that I was in a very unique position because I'd done the very thing that people were wanting me to help them with. And that's basically been what I've been focused on the last 8 years, is helping health professionals build scalable coaching businesses without the guesswork, without the grind, and ultimately so they can help more people. So that's what I've been doing. It's amazing. And that's, the journey in a nutshell.
I think the one differentiator, as you were sharing your other background information with me prior to the show, you hit a nerve with me. You talked about the massive noise in the world because of social media and the internet and all the billions of websites that are out there, the stories that are being told, and coaches, advisors, servant helpers that are genuinely trying to make a difference for people get overwhelmed and lost in the fray of a lot of the other noise that's going on out there.
Yeah.
So you talked about the ability to build that trust to cut through the noise and get to the next level with prospective clients.
Yeah. I'll touch on trust in a second, but the thing the thing that a lot of experts have to recognize, at least in our space and probably any other space too, is like being excellent is not good enough anymore. Like being great at what you do is like a prerequisite to be able to play the game. But a lot of people stop at that, and they think that just because they have all these letters behind their name or this experience or this pedigree is like people's gonna like their clients or customers will fall into their lap. That is significantly less likely to happen online. Like in a brick and mortar, it's different. Like people walk down the street, they see your sign, it's a little bit easier. But online, it's, as you said, it's like everyone's like unknown. So it's no longer about being the best, it's about being the best known. And it's very frustrating when you have really well-seasoned experts and they're being overshadowed by 20-year-old TikTokers who are dancing on their camera and like building these massive followings. But again, kudos to them for learning how to get attention, because attention is everything, because you could be amazing at what you do, you can help people in amazing ways, but if they don't know you exist, it doesn't matter how good you are. So being able to build the skill of self-promotion, of marketing, of putting yourself out there in a way that lets people know you exist is like, you can't outsource that. That's just something that we all have to develop. And that's the first step, is getting that attention. Now, where I think the online space has kind of been polluted over the last couple of years is a lot of people have become good at getting attention, and that's kind of where the buck has stopped. And there's been a lot of this like bait and switch, like people get in and they have terrible experiences working with various providers. And that has both tainted the industry of like coaching and education online, but also provided a great opportunity for people that are doing legitimate work. The challenge with that is that it's increased the level of skepticism more than anything I've ever experienced before. So now we're in this massive trust recession. No one believes anything. No one trusts anyone, especially online. So if you get attention, great. But now you really have to work to earn people's trust. And, having been in business for 20 years, I've kind of put together a bit of a framework or a formula that I've kind of reverse engineered, looking at what has allowed me to stay in business this long with what I would perceive as a very good reputation, because I don't think you can last in business with a bad one. So I'm happy to kind of unpack that a little bit, if that'd be useful for you and people listening to this. So if we think of an equation, so trust is the outcome, and we look at the top of the equation, there's three forces. We have goodwill, time, and proximity. And then underneath on the bottom half of the equation is uncertainty. So if we break these down one by one, we look at goodwill as a starting point. So goodwill is essentially doing it's two components. It's integrity and being helpful. So integrity is like doing what you say you're going to do. And being helpful is like, am I doing something that's adding value to someone's life? At least that's the way I see it. So integrity can be as simple as being consistent with sending an email to your email list once a week, whatever it is, twice a week, once a day. It's just this, people crave certainty. And when you're trying to build trust in an untrusting world, we have to look at the forces that create that. And if we're very sporadic in how we show up in terms of just serving people, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence, because they don't know if we're going to be there tomorrow or next week or the month after. So goodwill is important. It builds reciprocity. It also builds a little bit of reassurance in the sense that, like this person's adding value and they're going to continue doing so. So that's the first step, is just being a value adder through goodwill and doing so consistently. The second force at the top of the equation is time. So if we look at time in two facets, one is frequency and the second is duration. So if we look at frequency, the more often you are in front of people, the more they're going to trust you. And there's this cognitive bias called the mere exposure effect, which basically says people, or anything that's seen more often, is kind of like held in higher esteem and seen as more valuable. And there's a lot of research behind this with like political campaigns. The ads gets the most visibility typically. So that is really important in terms of frequency. So that could be, if you're running ads and people see your stuff, or you're sending one email a month compared to a couple a week, being consistent on social media. But anything you can do to be more frequently put in front of your audience is going to be a good thing. Duration is, the longer you're in the game, the easier it is, right? So if you are in business, in my case, for 20 years, it's a little bit easier to build a bit of trust because people have seen you for a long time. But if you're a relatively new business, you haven't been around, like you just have to understand that that's going to be working against you. And the only way to start having that work in your favor is to stay in the game as long as possible so you can have duration work on your side. The other component to that is like what you're doing here, Doug, with the podcast. A 30-second reel is going to have a very, very different impact on someone's life than listening to a 30 to 60-minute interview of you sharing your stuff. So time on brand, time on content in the context of duration is very powerful. And I mean, every podcaster I know, like they get their best customers or clients from podcasting because they're just consuming durations of their content. So that's time. The final piece of the top of the equation is proximity. And this one's interesting because physical proximity is a really powerful, it's almost like a trust accelerator. So if you ever meet someone in person, you're naturally going to build trust a lot faster because of the physical proximity. We can pick up on nonverbal cues, body language, and stuff like that. It's a little bit more difficult online. So that's why when you look at online, how do you build physical proximity? Well, as a starting point, have a Zoom conversation on video as opposed to just audio, or seeing someone on video versus just the written word. So you being able to see someone is just, again, it's a little bit closer to that physical proximity, which can make a huge difference. The other component to proximity, though, is emotional. So as the leader or the creator or the person who's putting a message out there, and this is something that I've had to get better at over the years, is really getting out of the authority frame all the time into being emotionally proximal. If that, like what I mean by that is being vulnerable, authentic, and transparent. So you don't always have to have everything figured out, and people will connect with you more when they recognize you have flaws. And so being able to openly share those flaws and just let people in will allow them to let you in. So that proximity emotionally is very, very important. And that's why I think like in our messaging, it's just important to be our true self more than trying to be someone else. So that's the top part of the equation. It's goodwill time.
Let me stop there if we can just a minute. Yeah. A couple of things. I think the goodwill part is pretty easy to understand. I think the time elements are interesting. As you were describing that, I'm thinking about some coaching I received when I decided to launch my podcast about, I don't know, now it's been about 5 years ago. One of the constant themes, and I talked to several so-called authorities in that space, and there was one thing that was consistent on everybody's top 3 list: be consistent. They said, pick a cadence. If you can only do 1 show a month, fine, just do 1 show a month, but do 1 show a month.
Yeah.
And whatever frequency you pick, and I being wired the way I am, when I decided to commit to mine, I looked around, I experimented a little bit, and then I decided I'm releasing 2 shows a week. And most podcast hosts that I know, when we talk about that, they go, oh my God, how in the world do you do that? Well, I took a little bit of my own coaching. I built a system around how to do that, so that my biggest time constraint is what we're doing right now, getting the live recording done. Mm-hmm. And that's, in terms of investment of time. But once we hit the close button on this, I have a little bit of an engine this thing goes through.
Yeah.
I get the final product. I get 6 or 8 30-second reels out of it. And everything gets automatically pushed out to social media on my designated release date of this episode. So I invested the time trying to automate all of that so that I could be consistent in moving through that process.
Yeah, for sure.
And it does create that continuity and that familiarity. And I like your proximity part of the equation. Everybody I talk to, and even in the direct leadership coaching I do, people lament the frustration with having to resort to video to do a lot of their meetings. A lot of companies are if they're not totally remote, they're at least hybrid. So they got part of the workforce in the office, part of the time, other part out virtual. And, they talk about, well, people come to the meeting, but they don't turn their video on, blah, 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 so people are feeling the pain of not having that proximity.
Yeah. Well, I think as a leader, we have to set the standard. So our whole company is virtual. We have about 40 plus team members across the States, Canada, and various other parts of the world. And for us, we have some very basic standards with our meetings, like video on, no distractions, right? So it's like, and also the meetings need to be, the meetings are optional in the sense that, like, if this is not a good use of your time, don't show up, right? So it's on us as leadership to be very intentional. If we're going to have 40 people on a call, that's 40 hours of payroll in 1 hour. It's like, let's not waste that and let's make the most use of it. So we've, over time, changed our cadence of communication. Like, we don't overdo meetings, and we look at, okay, which ones are critical for various aspects of the business. But, everyone's video's on. There's like non-negotiables, and that's just the culture that we've created. And the other thing in our culture that a lot of people really, really appreciate is the level of proximity, in the sense of like transparency. So we share everything with all of our team members. They know our P&L pretty much, our profit, revenue. Like yesterday, we had our monthly sync, which is our kind of month recap on the previous month. We share everything. What's working well in terms of client success, what's going on in marketing, sales, delivery, where are the challenges? And I just said yesterday, I'm like, guys, I'm going to be very honest with you. The last 2 months for me have been very frustrating, right? And there's like 2 things that are really like a 10 out of 10 problem that we have to solve. Now, I'm a very optimistic person, but I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that this is a very big issue that has to be resolved. So we let one of our leadership people go last week. We let our team know about, here's why, right? There was just, performance wasn't there, or core values were violated. And what that does, at least I think that we've created with our team, is a level of transparency, but also a degree of safety of saying, like, listen, like, we want to have an open dialogue. We want you guys to feel safe coming to us with, ideas, decisions, issues. And it's never perfect, right? Like, it's really challenging when, again, I'm talking about trust from the context of the team, but it's very similar, like market facing. We want to be able to create that environment where people feel like they can bring something to you without being, slapped on the wrist or whatever. So but it doesn't happen after one meeting. This is just like with anything, it just means consistent over and over and over again, and reminding people that that's the type of culture that we've built. So that proximity, I 100% agree with you. We do at least one in-person event a year for our team. So we bring everyone together, and that it's just like there's a level of bonding that happens that doesn't happen on Zoom. I tell our team, I'm like, guys, I'm a very direct person. Like, on Zoom, it's like, if we're talking for 30 minutes, it's like, let's go. But offline, if we have a team retreat, I'll hang out and talk about nothing with you for 2 hours. It's just a different container. So I think it's both an opportunity and a challenge to build more of a remote business these days. But again, I think it comes down to just really good leadership and building the type of culture that, is what you want to build within the organization. So
yeah, well, and buried in that is the notion that as a leader, you've got to live what you're speaking. It's one thing to put it out there, either give a big speech or put it in gold letters on a placard somewhere, but you got to live it. And when that person comes to you, they muster the confidence and effort to come bring an issue. You can't blow it back on them. You have to take it in, and you have to say, well, what I like to try to practice is, start out with thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. This is obviously not easy for you to bring and speak about, but thank you for being willing. And, now I want to honor that trust, and here's what I think we can do.
Yeah, for sure. You bring up a really good point about leading by example. I think for me, one of the best, I think like leadership is like parenting. Like, there's no one way to do it. There's no manual. Like, there's a lot of books and stuff, but there's no like, this is how you lead. Everyone's got different styles. I think there's principles for sure, but I think one of the most powerful things is leading by example. because I think it commands a tremendous amount of respect when people see that congruency, that integrity. And I look at an example that comes to mind is Winston Churchill. I saw a documentary of his on Netflix or Amazon Prime recently, and I didn't know half of what he was as a person until I watched this, and it was phenomenal. Like when he was in Parliament, he left Parliament to go fight on the front line in World War One. I'm like, what leader nowadays would do that? Like, it's crazy. And when you think of that, he did that to earn the respect of the people that were, reporting to him or fighting for the country. And that's like, it's no wonder why he's one of the most, esteemed leaders, because he like, in a lot of the things that he did is always like, let me take the lead. Let me not just like be an armchair politician. Let me like get out there and be with my people in the trenches. And I thought that was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I've interviewed a number of very successful CEOs, and somewhere woven in that, to your point about leadership is a little bit like parenting. There's no real manual on it. My answer to that I encourage people to consider is build your own framework. Reflect on how you believe you're wired, how you believe you might be destined to interface with the world, but then define a leadership set of attributes that you want to represent.
Yeah.
And do that work to actually build your foundation and structure around how you want to show up moment by moment. Because if you haven't done that work, you're just likely to show up rolling with the tide.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a good way of looking at it for sure. Yeah.
So let's get back to the equation real quick. The last part, underneath the uncertainty.
Yeah. So the top part, so the Goodwill-Time-Proximity, we want to increase those. Uncertainty, we want to decrease. So with uncertainty, there's 3 subcategories. We have proof. So proof is, what is the likelihood of something actually happening, whether that's market facing or internal. So if, let's say, you're hiring a new team member, especially at a higher level, there's going to be a certain amount of selling you're doing to make sure that like they see this as the right fit. So you want to provide proof, whether that's like in our case, we have a 3-year vision. So when people come in to work with us, they review this PDF, which is about 20 pages. It maps out our vision for the next 3 years. And that instills a tremendous amount it reduces uncertainty because it shows them the roadmap of what we're looking to achieve. And so that's an example of how we can use that from that perspective. From a marketing perspective, it's like social proof, right? So reducing uncertainty in that case. The second piece to uncertainty is maybe a test drive. So how do you try before you buy, if you will? So when we're hiring someone, we let them know in the interview process, like, hey, just to be clear, Doug, I really hope this works out for as long as possible. But within the first 90 days, and maybe even shorter, we're going to know for sure. So we can almost look at this as a test drive to see if we like working together and if this is making sense. And if it is, we'll continue on beyond 90 days. And so I think setting that expectation, at least in that context, has been useful for us. And that's something that we do. But even before that, when we're looking to hire people, one of the first things we do is a test project. So in that case, we're looking to test drive their expertise, because in the world of business, the challenging thing that I think is one of the biggest challenges is, like in sport, you can see game tape. Like you can see how that athlete performed on the field. You don't have that luxury in business. You're taking their word and references and a CV as track record. So in terms of test driving a potential candidate, it's like, here's what you might encounter in the role. Walk us through how you'd fix that. So we can assess their ability to do that. On the flip side, if let's say you have a client who's potentially looking to work with you, they're not sure what it looks like, we can consider offering a test drive if it's suitable for the business model. So the customer feels more reassured that this is the right decision for them. It's like taking a car for a test spin as opposed to just buying it from a website. And then the third piece in terms of reducing uncertainty is showing the process. So if you think of a lot of restaurants have open kitchens, and I don't know what the reason is for that, but maybe it's reassuring for people to see what's happening behind the kitchen. I know it is for my mom. So she feels better going to a restaurant if she can see the kitchen, because for some reason she feels mistrusting of what's happening behind closed doors. So if she can see it, now she can see the process. And she's like, cool, they're not spitting in our food. Everything's going to be okay. So in our business, like, how can we show behind the scenes? Is there like client events we can get video footage of? Is there a new product that you're working on where you can give people a glimpse into as you're working through it? And so all of these things give, again, just an extra little bit of reassurance that you're a real person, that your business is legit, that you're doing good things. And all of that helps to reduce uncertainty over time. And then all of these factors combined start to increase trust either within a company or in your marketplace.
Yeah, I love that idea of on the employment candidate giving a practical exercise. I know in one of my companies I did that. We had a dismal success rate hiring the right kind of processing people for the work we were doing. It was paper intensive at the time, and a lot of things had to be done. And what we were feeling the pain of, people could show up and they could speak the vocabulary of our industry during the interview, but we didn't have a way for them to really demonstrate their knowledge and application of what they were talking about.
Yeah.
So we came up with a practical exam that happened to be a test case. It was a file folder of all the pertinent documents that we were going to be handling. And we told people on the phone screen up front that there was going to be this practical test. Well, the first thing that we experienced was half of our phone screens self-selected out. They wouldn't show up or they said, don't bother to schedule me. I'm, basically saying I'm faking it. I was just hoping to get a job. And
Yeah.
when the half that did show up, we could tell the practical test for someone who really knew the work could be done in about 15 minutes. But when somebody sat in our conference room for over an hour, we knew they weren't going to be a fit.
Yeah.
And then we, even for those that kind of plowed through it, we still graded it and we could tell. And as soon as we started only making offers to those candidates who successfully completed that test, did we start to see some success in fulfilling our mission to our customers and putting credible people on the front line that could really do the work and be relied upon to get it done properly.
Yeah. That's great.
And our turnover rate went to near zero because we were finding the candidates that genuinely knew the work, liked the work, and wanted a full-time opportunity to do the work. So
Yeah.
It was a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And like, I think it's you can learn a lot from all of this. Like the fact you said that people who are maybe a little bit better potentially at the position got it done faster. It's like, well, speed is a reflection of intelligence maybe just from experience of having seen the patterns over and over again versus someone who's like, oh shit, I've never seen this before. What do I do? And you start to pick up on stuff like that as you see people on the field, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It really helped do that. So let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneur who's come up with a great idea, but is now trying to enter this fray of this massively oversaturated marketplace called the internet. What do you typically advise people to start with, and what are the steps you suggest to them?
Yeah, so I think, again, we work with health professionals, but the principles apply to any business, right? So the first, there's 4 growth killers that I'll start with, and then I'll segue into the fixes to those. So number 1 is no one knows you exist, right? So that's the number 1 barrier. Okay, obscurity. Second is some people might know you exist, but they don't understand what it is you do or what you offer. That's a messaging issue. Third is they understand what you offer, they just don't want it. That's an offer issue. And then fourth is they want what you have to offer, but they don't trust you. So that's the trust piece that we just talked about. So we have to really solve for obscurity, messaging, offer, and trust. And so the easiest way to go from obscure to visible is to run ads. Like that is the single most guaranteed way to get visibility, because you can spend $100 a day on Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and guarantee that you'll be put in front of X number of people. Now, I'm not advising people to do that because you have to have something on the back end of that, because you can guarantee visibility, but it doesn't guarantee conversions. So you can spend a lot of money and get visible, but if you have like nowhere to send people, then you're going to be out of business pretty soon. So if we put that to the side for a second, we really have to think about the messaging and the offer. So as a starting point, in order for messaging to be effective, it needs to speak to one person or one single target market. So if you are the whatever, like last year in our house in Toronto, we had a bit of an ant issue. So I didn't like call a general contractor. I looked for like ant removal experts. Cool. So now like you come across those different service providers and they're like, cool, I'm like the best ant expert in this area. You give them a shout. You feel reassured that they're the right person because that's what they do. And the messaging is on point with what you're dealing with. So the first decision we all have to make in business is, who's the single target market that I want to serve? And specifically, what's the problem that they're dealing with that I can solve, right? Every business exists to solve problems. So we have to clarify the singular problem as a starting point, because then all the messaging and the offer will flow from that. Like in our worlds, a lot of health professionals struggle in business when they come online because they're generalists, right? Like if a doctor is a doctor, the patients fall into their lap. But if you come online and you start to proactively market yourself, you can't just market to everyone. Like you have, like it's going to take you forever and it'll cost you a fortune. So you have to narrow down to one specific condition or one problem. Then the messaging can be on point. People who see that message are like, man, that's what I'm going through. This person knows exactly what I'm experiencing. Therefore, they feel you are a better fit. With the offer, then we have to think about, well, what would be a dream come true scenario if a person has this problem? How can I match that with an offer / product service delivery that would solve that? And then what does that look like in terms of the client experience? Is it a tech solution? Is it a product? Is it a supplement? Is it a service, like a coaching program? And then, within that, what are the things you are able to deliver on that match with what the client would be like? This would be a dream come true. And so that's really where we all have to start in businesses. Again, if we kind of just take it upstream, is we have to identify a single problem that we can fix. Like I tell my kids, and they ask me like, hey, Dad, how can I make money? I'm like, well, that's the wrong question to ask. The better question is look around and ask yourself, what problem are people facing that I can help them solve? So that's like singular problem, single target market. And then from that, we think about how do I help them solve that, which can be the offer. And then we marry that together with the right messaging. That's where it starts. Once you have that, then we can look at ads if we want instant visibility, because now we have a vehicle that will get us in front of the people that we want to essentially serve. And we have messaging that resonates and an offer that they could potentially be interested in. So now we can at least test this as a system. And so that's pretty much what that would look like if we're taking something, to market in this online world.
Yeah. Wise words. And I have heard that basic premise presented in many ways in prior years. Even I myself, as an executive coach, I once had a very dear friend that I count as not just a friend, but a little bit of a mentor. He was an interim CEO that was always called upon by private equity money to go in and parachute in and turn around as some business they had just bought or that had turned out to be struggling. He was one of those kind of fix-it CEOs. And when I told him I wanted to start doing leadership coaching, he shook his head and he said, "No, you don't." I said, "Excuse me." And he said, "Doug, let me tell you," he said, "in my experience, only 5% of leaders in America understand leadership. They never think about that word or that thought." And he said, if you go to market selling that, you're not going to get anywhere. He said, what you need to do is talk to people that are in leadership roles, but talk about the problems they're facing that they can't seem to figure out. It's about leadership development, that if they would study and work on certain leadership skills, they could handle it better. But that's not the question they're going to be asking when they admit they've got a problem.
Yeah.
He said, you need to change your wording and verbiage to talk about specific problems and conditions that most leaders face. Maybe it's high turnover, maybe it's lack of team trust, maybe it's a culture breakdown,
Yep, for
many
sure.
different things.
And it's like the delivery doesn't have to change. It's just like the wrapping paper in terms of how you position it that changes.
Right.
And that's the thing that's not second nature for most of us. We have to learn how to communicate in that way. So like to your point, it's like no one has a leadership issue. They want to avoid having a hard conversation of letting someone go, right? Or
Right.
like whatever the specific issue is, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
neat. I think we're about up on time, Yuri. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they are interested in knowing more about your work.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for having me, Doug. It's been a nice conversation. The best place is probably Instagram. I'm at Healthpreneur. And if you want to just send me a DM there, like, hey, I just saw you on Doug's show and enjoyed the conversation. If you happen to be a health professional, we can hook you up with some resources that might be able to help you out. And happy to discuss, however we can best support you. So Instagram at Healthpreneur, probably the best spot.
Perfect. Well, as always, folks, we'll have that information in the show notes. So please feel free to hop down, mash that button, and you can reach out to Yuri. And I presume on your Instagram, you get a lot of your material that's playing there. So
Yeah. We're on YouTube as well. But just to keep it simple,
Yeah.
if you just type in Healthpreneur, you'll find our stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, great.
Well, one last time, thank you so much for sitting in. Really appreciate your insights and sharing this with us.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, folks, this is the part of the show where I do like to remind you, we too have a YouTube version of this. So video version of this on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, leave us a comment, and give us, ask us a question. If you've got a topic or a guest you want to recommend, let us know that as well. But I think that pretty much wraps up everything for today. Go out there, make it a good one. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.